Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
It's no secret to anyone that there are still irresponsible people in the world who have pets, but do not take proper care of them, sparing their time and money. They do not sterilize their cats and dogs, and get rid of unplanned offspring in cruel ways, drowning them. Involuntary witnesses of such a scene were Manuel and Isabelle, or at least that's how it seemed to them at first. A certain man emerged from the woods with a large cardboard box and, without much effort, tossed it into the river. The couple was coming back from a well-known healer in whom they had placed great hopes. They had long dreamed of having a child, but with each passing year, that dream was fading. The trip didn't offer much comfort either. It seemed to them that he didn't want to have anything to do with them, as there were no prospects. He was more of a fortune teller than a healer, it seemed. He listened to the woman, spoke with both spouses, and then expressed something strange, like children would come, but in an unusual way. It wouldn't come when they expected, and not quite the way they wanted. It would be decided on the way back. The most important thing is to remember Moses' law: do not turn to the right or to the left. Nonsense. What does that have to do with? We wasted our time, Manuel grumbled as they left. Isabelle remained silent. She felt like she was grasping some meaning. They had been afraid to go to him for a long time precisely because of this, and now they were returning in complete confusion. And then suddenly, such a scene. Wait, Manu. I don't like this at all. Stop. When the man who had thrown the box noticed that a car was stopping nearby, he quickly turned and disappeared into the woods. However, he didn't particularly interest the couple. Manuel gently stroked his wife's cheek. Don't worry so much, darling. Everything is fine, I'm sure. I am too. Get the box out. I think that's what he was talking about. Getting out of the car, the man realized with horror that they had stopped for a reason. There was a newborn baby in the box, struggling to breathe. As a neonatologist, he was all too familiar with these cries. Manuel, kicking off his shoes, waded into the river. Fortunately, it wasn't too deep near the shore, and he only had to wade knee-deep into the water. The box was already starting to get soggy. The cold water quickly reached the baby's body. The man quickly pulled the baby out and rushed back to the car, where Isabelle had already gotten out with widened eyes of amazement. Manuel sat in the back seat, quickly unwrapped the baby, and examined him. It seems he's all right. Isabelle, are you catatonic or something? Are you okay? He got out of the car, holding poor baby in his hands. I'm okay. That's what he was talking about. About this. Give him to me. Take him. Hold him carefully. Get in the car. We need to get to the hospital and the police urgently. And don't talk nonsense. You're in shock, that's understandable. I'm in shock too from what just happened. Manuel got into the car. They drove off. Isabelle held the quiet baby close to her chest, examining his little face. Wait, Manu. Are you sure a hospital, let alone the police, is necessary? What will happen to this baby there? Manuel was so surprised that he stopped the car and turned to his wife. What are you talking about, Isabelle? Where else should he go? He needs to be examined by doctors, then he'll be sent to a foster home, where qualified people will take care of him. And the police should find the mother of this child and that criminal. Do you remember that man? What was he wearing? I didn't even try to remember. And I don't want to know who he is or what. I'm his mother, and you're his father. And a doctor, by the way. We should adopt him. Everything turned out just as that healer, whoever he was, said. The child appeared, but not exactly as we expected. Moses' law, not turning to the right or to the left. Moses was found in the river. But we will name him Santiago, as we wanted, not Moses. And we won't give him to anyone. You know what it's like for children in that foster home. You know that even if they allow us to adopt him, it will take a long time. And all that time, he'll be alone. I kept wondering, what does Moses' law have to do with it, where we must not turn away? Here it is, the answer. What kind of superstition is this, Belle? Her husband asked, bewildered. I understand everything, but what are you suggesting? Just take the child, just like that? Why can't we do that, Manu? After all, we've been dreaming of having children for so long. Here he is, our boy. We wanted to call him Santiago. Why can't we do that? Because he's not our child. Because he's a person, and we can't just claim him as ours, that's why. It's not ancient times, and you're not the daughter of a pharaoh. All of this needs to be done properly, you must agree. We will do it properly. My father is not a pharaoh, but he will help, I know. What will happen if we give this child away? I won't be able to live after that. And I won't be able to live with you. This is not blackmail. I've already decided that I'll file for divorce if the situation doesn't resolve itself, and it has now. I don't have the right to just give the child away, you understand? I don't understand anything, and I don't want to understand. I can't imagine doing what you're suggesting. We don't have the right. Let's go home, my dear, please. If you still decide that we should give this child away, then we will. But for now, please, let's go home. He's cold and hungry. We need to buy food, diapers, and blankets on the way. On the way home, each of them thought about their own things. Manuel still couldn't decide on what his wife was suggesting. Isabelle, on the other hand, cooed over the baby and felt happier with each passing minute. She felt like a mother. This was her child. And she knew that she wouldn't give him up for anything. If her husband insisted, she would simply run away from him, hide, and not give this boy, her Santiago, to anyone. On the way, they bought everything necessary for the baby. When they arrived home, they immediately took care of him. Manuel examined the baby, treated his umbilical cord, did everything that was necessary. Isabelle prepared formula and did everything so confidently and calmly, as if this child had been living with her for more than just one day. He was born just a few hours ago, said Manuel. It's clear that it was at home, without any medical assistance. But at the same time, the baby is perfectly healthy. Of course, we found him in time. He didn't have time to catch a cold or get infected. Well, you see, that's great. Everything will be just fine now. In the evening, I'll call my father and consult with him. I'm sure he'll help us. And I'm sure he'll say that we're just crazy and should give this baby away. Well, at least report him. Report to whom? Why? You yourself say he's healthy. And if we report him, they'll take him away from us, examine him, scrutinize him. He'll not only become an anonymous foundling, but also a participant in a criminal case. It's not his fault he was born to such people. Isabelle managed to persuade her husband that the baby should be kept. Manuel saw that his wife was not herself, that she would really do something completely inappropriate if this child didn't stay with them. And it would be difficult for him too. He examined many infants daily, but with this one, he had already developed truly paternal feelings. It was so strange and exciting. They now had a son, and their life had gained a new meaning. The first time Isabelle got married was for love, but also due to an unplanned pregnancy. She was very young at the time and deeply in love with Javier, willing to do anything for him. He, equally young, simply took advantage of her willingness. When she realized she would have a child, she was somewhat scared. After all, she had to tell her parents everything. But she was also happy. She thought that now Javier wouldn't go anywhere. Yes, she felt she rushed things. The novelty had worn off in their relationship, which had become adult too soon. She had nothing else to surprise him with, nothing to hold onto him, and he seemed to be growing distant. But now, something new had appeared, something that wouldn't allow them to just be lovers. And he was not ready for marriage, let alone a child. He was also very young and believed that an early marriage would ruin his life. After all, he still wanted to study, work, and finally have some fun. Of course, he had feelings for Isabelle, and maybe he didn't plan to break up with her. Why not date a young, beautiful girl? But getting married? What do you mean, a child? He asked the girl, disappointed and even offended when she told him this joyful news. It's too early for us, you understand. No education, no profession. We don't even have a place of our own. But the child is already here, Isabelle tried to convince him. Where is it? It's not a child yet, it's just something. Women are sometimes doing that thing too. Well, not to give born. Never. The girl firmly replied. That's real murder. Everyone will tell you that. It's not murder at all. That's just what they say, but in reality, all women do it. I heard that my mom did it, and yours probably did too. What's more, my ex-classmate Anna went to the doctor and had an abortion without any scandals or talks. And there's no child now. They live just fine. I mean, they broke up with Ramon, but now they both have other relationships. They live freely and happily. I don't want that kind of happiness. My happiness is you and our little baby. Isabelle placed her hand on her still quite flat belly. She didn't notice the change in her beloved's face at that moment. But it wasn't difficult to guess that Javier wasn't eager to become a husband and a father. On that day, they parted ways, agreeing to think it over. Isabelle had nothing special to think about. She already perceived her child as a living person. It was a given. She would have a child, no matter what Javier decided. She hoped that he would still marry her, and they would be a family, him, her, and the baby. After all, he said he loved her. And although he didn't rush to get married and take her to the registry office at the first moment, she thought he was just taken by surprise. She was scared at first too. Today, he would think about it and realize that he couldn't live without his Isabelle. He wanted the baby, and tomorrow, he would definitely propose. But tomorrow, he didn't call, the meeting didn't happen. Well, maybe he was just busy, Isabelle thought. Loving girls can come up with all kinds of excuses. And Javier didn't call the next day either. So the young woman decided to catch him near his house. Javier. Isabelle called out, trying to keep her voice from sounding too plaintive. He startled, stopped, turned around. Oh, hi, he said, as if she were just an acquaintance. Hello. Tell me, why don't you call? Why don't you come? Have you decided anything? Isabelle didn't want to waste words on meaningless conversations. But it seemed he didn't want to understand anything. What should I decide? And his look was so uncomprehending, detached. Well, about us and our baby? The girl explained. Listen there, Isabelle, I told you. He took the girl by the elbow, led her a little to the side of the road, as if he didn't want them to be seen together. From the very beginning, I decided that it was too early for us to get married, to become parents. We're barely 18. What kind of wedding? What kind of baby? Then why did you do all this? Isabelle asked, barely holding back tears. You said you loved me. I'm not refusing it now. Yes, I love you, and I'm not against seeing you, but only without children and stuff. Why do you need that? Tell me. Once you get rid of it, everything will be the same for us. We'll be free people. No, Javier, you don't understand, the girl said, trying to speak calmly and firmly. Nothing will be the same as before, and I don't intend to get rid of anyone. The child will be, and we need to decide something. I won't be able to hide it for long, and that means. All right, don't hide it. Tell your parents today, either yours or mine. And you'll see, they'll take you to the doctor themselves. It's even better this way. Tell them, for sure. They're adults, reasonable people. Besides, I heard this procedure costs a lot of money. They'll pay for it themselves. Never, I will never do that. The girl cried out, no longer holding back her tears. We'll have to get married, and you'll have to raise this child. And, turning around, she ran home. She had hoped that Javier would run after her. He didn't. She waited for him to call in the evening because he had said that he loved her. He didn't call. Her mother, father, and grandmother living with them initially looked at their daughter's mood calmly and understandingly. It seemed she had had a falling out with her boyfriend. It happens. But then they realized that it wasn't so simple. Their daughter refused to eat, and even when she sat down at the table with everyone, she ate with obvious effort, rejecting the food she used to love. And when she jumped up from the table during breakfast and rushed to the bathroom, where familiar sounds could be heard, the three adults exchanged knowing glances. "Good heavens, show me this dirtbag who knocked up my little girl," her father said sternly, a police officer who worked in their district. Her mother and grandmother exchanged glances and sighed. The situation was clear. The only thing unclear was what to do now. When the pale Isabelle came out to the hallway, her mother didn't allow her to hide in her room. She led her to the kitchen, sat her down at the table, and sternly asked, "How many months?" "What?" the daughter muttered without looking up. "Months." "Well, no matter how many, tell me something else." "Who?" her father ordered. "It's probably Javier," the grandmother guessed. "Yes." Isabelle's face began to involuntarily contort from the approaching tears. "And what does he say about this?" Her father switched to interrogation mode. "Nothing. He says it's too early for us." Isabelle finally let her tears flow. "I see. Troublemaking is not too early, but taking responsibility for it is early," her father said. "I'll explain to him what early means and when it ends." "Daddy, please don't." Isabelle got scared. "Isabelle," her father replied affectionately, "if you, little one, had come to me before all this and asked if it was necessary or not, I would have answered you. But now? It's too late to reason. But people will still say that People will talk in all sorts of ways, no matter what. But think about what they will say about me. Think about how I'll be able to work, especially with young people. What will I tell people if anyone can look me in the eye and say that I couldn't raise my daughter properly, that she brought disgrace? How will I talk to others? How will I explain to them what is allowed and what is no?" "Calm down, Berto, calm down," his wife tried to soothe her agitated husband. And the grandmother stroked Isabelle's head, also trying to calm her son-in-law down. "She shouldn't cry now, Roberto, don't upset her. Calm down, dear, don't cry, everything will be fine. This idiot will be so happy to marry you, he'll even bow down at your feet, beg you, you'll see it," Senor Hidalgo promised. "If he decides that he can treat my daughter like this, I'll explain to him what's allowed and what's not. And you, Isabelle, stay quiet. He'll keep feeding you nonsense about all this being too early and all later." The father really took the matter of restoring his daughter's honor seriously. He decided not to go straight to the possible relative's house, but first find out as much as possible about their family. Maybe they were such people that giving them his only daughter would be a crime. In any case, he didn't intend to let the matter run its course, but gathering as much information as possible was necessary. Who knows who they would turn out to be, troublemakers or people who would make it difficult to fight with them. In that case, it was fine. They raised their daughter, and they would raise their grandchild. But it was better, of course, if there was something to leverage. Turned out there was. The next evening, he quietly told his wife. Normal family, simple people, no frills. Daddy had a case with a minor, hooliganism. He got away with a suspended sentence, but it seems like he got scared back then, seriously. Now he's working as a driver. There have been minor violations related to this, but nothing significant. The mother works at a factory. They have a younger daughter, and you can't find fault with her either. There have been complaints from neighbors. Because of Javier, it seems. He played loud music, left trash in the stairwell, and brought groups of friends over. But the apartment is 4-roomed, so we can easily move our daughter there. That's good, but they need to get married. What if the scoundrel refuses? The mother hesitated. I'll show him refuse. He has something to lose too. No, he didn't sell anything, just smoked. But it's leverage for us. His parents need to understand that it's better for him to get married and live quietly than to end up in jail soon. It's clear he'll keep doing the same things. Why did Belle find a husband like that? The mother exclaimed in surprise. Well, she found what she found. What, should she be looking for a prince now? It's too late. And he, becoming a family man, will feel the responsibility. No more partying for him. Especially not such entertainments. He's not a bad guy, actually. He's studying in college, and not badly, he's planning to go to university. Yes, it's early, yes, not the best option, but you should have thought about that earlier. So what now? Should we go to them, to his parents, right away? Where else would we go? What's the use of talking to these kids? They did their thing, now we have to clean up. The next day, Isabelle's parents were sitting at Javier's parents' house. Explaining the reason for the visit didn't take much time. Perhaps the young man's parents were already aware of his misdeeds. But Isabelle's mother was not going to give up. And why are you telling us this? Thank God, we have a boy, not a girl. He's not pregnant. She immediately retorted. Let me tell you, lady, Isabelle's father said sternly, dressed in a police uniform and addressing Javier's mother. We're all pregnant here right now, and we'll all have to solve this problem together, no matter what our children did. But you need to find out who did what. Your daughter told you that she's pregnant with Javier's child, but maybe it's not like that at all. Aren't you ashamed? Isabelle's mother was offended. At least let's not resort to insults. Why would I be ashamed? My daughter didn't lead anyone astray. She's still so young. But what about my son? He's a young man, and he's acting like one. He can have as many girlfriends as he wants. Is he supposed to marry them all? No one is touching your daughter. Please don't insult mine either. Your son doesn't refuse. Yes, he was dating Isabelle. Yes, they had a relationship. But now he doesn't seem to want to get married. It's too early for him. And I completely agree with that. It's too early. But you should have thought about it earlier. And now, is he planning to abandon a pregnant girl? Why should he tie himself up for life? Javier's mother couldn't calm down. You should think, ma'am, that he can tie himself up without getting married. And marriage, by the way, is not the worst option for him right now. Wasn't he arrested? Maybe. Well, and there are some other questions about him. What questions? Of course you will tell everything about him right now. He was arrested with no real reason. He never even smoked stuff like that. I'm not gonna slander him. I'm looking at him like if he's already my son-in-law. And I'm also not that kind of person who slander own relatives. You know, due to my duty, I know a bit more about you than you think. You have a debt for the apartment, haven't paid for 2 months. And there are other minor offenses that we can find if you insist on putting the blame on my daughter for nothing. Oh, we forgot to pay, big deal. Does that mean he has to get married for that? We have money, you know. You can accuse anyone of anything like this. Should they be punished for that? Okay, mother, that's enough, her husband said with a heavy voice. Your son has gotten himself into some serious trouble. Let him get married. Otherwise, you see, who knows how far things will go. He'll have to get married sooner or later anyway. What's the difference now or in 5 years? If their life together doesn't work out, they'll get divorced, and that's it. I'm very pleased with this sensible decision, Isabelle's father praised. And then the parents started discussing the wedding and the future life of the young couple. Javier, when he came home in the evening, learned about the visit and that he needed to go to the registry office soon with Isabelle and their documents to submit the application. What application? I never intended to. He started, but Isabelle's father was adamant. You didn't intend to, but you did something you shouldn't have. And now, I'm sorry, there's no way out of this. You were roped without being consulted. Your future father-in-law already came over and told us everything about your affairs. Javier realized that he was in serious trouble. The next day, he bought a small bouquet of carnations on his way home and went to Isabelle's house to propose. Isabelle and her parents were already waiting for him. Isabelle was waiting, even though she understood that things weren't going as she had dreamed. But the proposal was made, and consent was given, so the next step was to prepare for the wedding. All the other work was on the shoulders of their parents. They calculated the expenses, organized the wedding, and helped with buying the outfits. The bride and groom, feeling ashamed, became more and more silent. They didn't seem particularly happy, especially Javier. But as two young adults, they simply obeyed what their parents decided. The parents also decided where it would be more convenient for the newlyweds to live. Javier's parents were not eager to accept their new daughter-in-law into their home, but their arguments were strong. You have a 4-room apartment for 4 people. When Isabelle and the child come, you'll be 6. We have only a 3-room apartment, and it's small. And those same 6 people. Your apartment is naturally larger, and it's only on the 2nd floor, while ours is on the 8th. How will you manage with a stroller? The elevator often doesn't work. Why do you keep undermining us? You've already married off your daughter, and now you want to push her into our apartment, the future mother-in-law said, tearfully rather than angrily. Everything falls on our shoulders, and it seems like you don't care. Although you're more to blame. You didn't teach your daughter how to protect herself from such things. I have my own daughter growing up here. Let's not argue, Isabelle's mother intervened. We'll give more money for the wedding. And besides, this is just the beginning. We'll see how things go. Maybe we'll swap, buy them something separate. Or maybe they'll get by on their own, maybe they'll rent. Nowadays, many young people rent apartments, it's not a big deal. Who's to blame that they decided to get married at such a young age? You didn't exactly warn your son and talk about the consequences. Now we're dealing with the aftermath of what our children have done themselves. Whether they had decided or not, there was no escaping it. They got married. The wedding was not luxurious and not particularly cheerful. The matchmakers were dissatisfied with each other and with the choice of the young couple. The bride and groom, though they seemed to be happy about the event, already understood that something was not going as they had hoped. They realized that the decision to get married was not their own, but rather a result of circumstances and parental pressure. The wedding was celebrated, and a new adult life began. It didn't make Isabelle happy at all. She found herself in a strange family, where no one was pleased to see her, not even her husband, who was essentially a stranger. Isabelle loved him, but family life wasn't working out. In fact, there was no family life for her. The mistress of the house was her mother-in-law. Isabelle couldn't even approach the stove to cook something for herself. Javier's mother always stood nearby, commenting on her every action with great displeasure. So, she couldn't fully feel like a wife. Javier's younger sister, a 12-year-old girl, misbehaved, constantly hung around in their room, shamelessly rummaged through Isabelle's things. On the very first day, the young wife sensed that she wasn't liked here, and they made it clear to her every day, if not directly, then indirectly. One day, she overheard her mother-in-law talking in the kitchen with a neighbor. The neighbor exclaimed, "Why did your Javier get married so early?" Her mother-in-law irritably replied, "Try not to get married." This bride of his, she swooped in right away and ran to complain to her father. And who is he? A lousy cop. He almost dragged the guy to the registry office at gunpoint. He threatened us with everything, from putting him in jail to kicking him out of the apartment. Yeah, Javier got unlucky with her. She must be quite something if her parents are willing to get her out of the house. Don't even mention it. They foisted her on us like this. She acts like a queen all day. Doesn't cook, doesn't clean, doesn't talk to her new relatives. Is this the bride I dreamt of? Is this the one Javier was supposed to marry? Did they give a dowry for her at least? Well, of course. What's on her, that's the dowry. She arrived like she's checking into a hotel with her purse. Feed her, dress her, and shoe her. Her dowry is in her belly, she'll drop it soon. It remains to be seen who gave it to her. It was tough for pregnant Isabelle to hear such conversations. And the most hurtful part was that she didn't get any support from Javier himself. He behaved as if they hadn't even gotten married. He mainly talked to his parents, and she would just sit alone in the room. They didn't invite her to the table, she ate by herself because Javier ate with his family. After college, he didn't rush home. He came when he wanted, and then he started drinking. Who was to blame for all this? Of course, Isabelle. And what about you? Are you such a wonderful wife? Why can't you keep your husband? He runs away from you. Or do you hope that his parents will continue to raise him? No, sorry. He's a grown man now, the head of your little family. Now you're his mother and father. Deal with him yourself, his mother would scold her every day. Before he got married, he never came home drunk. And now look at him. Isabelle tried to talk to Javier, but nothing came of it. His response to all her complaints was always the same. What's the problem? I married you. What's wrong with that? Married and that's it? Thanks, benefactor. Do you think you've done me a favor? Isabelle would say, swallowing her tears. I don't know if it was for you or for me. Your daddy almost came at me with a knife, saying, get married, and that's it. There will be a child and all. And I'm to blame that you got pregnant and didn't want an abortion? Other women somehow manage, they don't make a fuss. But I had to, as they say, cover my sins with a wedding crown. Now I'm to blame for not being like myself. And I never promised you that I'm not gonna change. But you said yourself that you loved me. I loved you. And I would still love you now, why not? We'd be dating, going out, just like before. Maybe we would have gotten married later, but by choice. Not because your daddy came to my parents and started scaring them with who knows what. Oh, screw you. Do you think you're so important to me? If it weren't for this pregnancy, I wouldn't have anything to do with you myself. What a gentleman you are. Oh, you would be out with me. Who needs you? The girl said, choking back tears, of course, in the heat of the moment. But after that, their already not so great life together completely fell apart. Javier only came home to spend the night, and not every night, often drunk. Then she found out that he wasn't just spending time with his friends. It seemed he had other girlfriends. Isabelle was disgusted, but her mother-in-law was worried about her little boy, fretted, and blamed the bride for everything. I don't understand why you even got married. You don't need a husband, you don't want to see him. So why did your daddy insist on standing up for you, demanding that he get married? Ask my daddy. Isabelle would reply, then close herself in her room and cry and couldn't stop. She understood that her father wanted what was best, but it didn't turn out that way. Nothing good came of it, in short. The pregnancy continued to progress, and Isabelle couldn't even imagine what would happen next, after the baby was born. Clearly, no one was waiting for him, no one was prepared, and no one wanted this child, just as they didn't want her. It turned out that no one needed her, neither her husband, nor his family, nor her own parents. Sometimes she wanted to run back home, beg them to take her back, say that she couldn't bear living in such a hostile home anymore. In fact, why wouldn't her parents just accept and take her back now? After all, she wouldn't be an unmarried girl who had gotten pregnant and partied too much, she would be just a divorced woman. A common thing. But she didn't run away or ask. Firstly, she was ashamed. Secondly, she wasn't sure her parents would accept her without reproach. And thirdly, she was overwhelmed by some kind of apathy, she didn't want anything. She didn't go to the doctor anymore and didn't go outside for a walk. No one cared about it. Mom would sometimes call, ask how she was doing, how she felt. And Isabelle, trying to sound as cheerful as possible, would answer that everything was fine. And her mother-in-law and Javier didn't seem to be interested in the course of her pregnancy at all. They just didn't seem to care. Her mother-in-law would sometimes shout in the corridor or complain to the neighbors in the hope that her daughter-in-law would hear. What a godsend we got as a tenant. She sits in her lair all day, like a mole. Doesn't lift a finger. How does she plan to live with a child? Does she think that she'll give birth and I'll take care of her baby? She's deluded. I didn't ask for this grandchild, and I don't need anyone like her. I won't even touch her brat. Let her mother take care of it. I haven't even had a break from my own kids. All these worries didn't go unnoticed. Isabelle went into labor prematurely, and the birth was complicated. The child survived only a few hours. They put Isabelle into a separate ward. The doctors understood how difficult it was for a woman who had just lost a child to be in the same room where they brought in babies for feeding. But, lying alone all day, she heard the babies crying, saw happy women, heard their phone conversations. Sometimes she would approach the window and watch the happy mothers being met by loving husbands, beaming relatives with flowers, congratulations, receiving a brightly decorated envelope. Nothing good awaited her. Javier didn't even come to the maternity hospital once, didn't try to console her. His mother even less so. Only her parents came, told her that everything would be fine, she would have children in her future, everything would work out. She couldn't even imagine it. What could possibly work out now? There was no love, no child, no life. And did she even need it now? Why even bother living? It's unclear how she would have survived this terrible period if it weren't for a young neonatologist who came and explained why her child had turned out this way. And he comforted her as best he could. Manuel wasn't a local. He had recently been assigned to this district after finishing medical school. Isabelle's case touched him deeply. The unhappy, very young woman, apparently abandoned by her husband, became more than just a patient for him. He realized it fairly quickly. Feeling that he was the only one who cared about her fate, he often visited the girl's ward, inquired about her health, talked about the need to live, that she was too young, and that things could still get better in her life. Isabelle didn't think that way at all. She didn't think about anything at all, silently enduring her grief. Only her conversations with Manuel gave her a little confidence that she had a future. After being discharged, she didn't go to her husband's house, she returned to her parents. They welcomed her warmly, tried to do everything to help the girl recover, forget about her deceased child, and her failed personal life. There was nothing left tying her to Javier. She didn't even want to appear in that house. She did go there, of course, to collect her things. Javier wasn't home, and he probably wouldn't have tried to keep her anyway. His mother's words convinced her of that. She seemed to want to support her unloved daughter-in-law, but she only said that everything had turned out for the best. Well, you got married without much desire. Imagine what it would have been like to live with a child. It happened as if it didn't want to live with you, her mother-in-law said. And this child was her grandson. Soon, Isabelle filed for divorce, dreaming only of not meeting people who had never become her relatives. Manuel kept calling her. At first, it seemed like he was just a doctor. He asked about her health, her mental state, gave some advice. But then it became clear that he had another interest. He started meeting her on the street, then inviting her to meet, giving her flowers, inviting her to go out and have fun. Isabelle and Javier's divorce went relatively smoothly. They didn't have any children or shared property. In other words, there was nothing to divide. Her ex-husband only said, "I told you to get rid of it. Everything would have been fine then. None of this would have happened. You took almost a whole year of my life. And so many nerves." Isabelle didn't respond to this. What could she say to that? They got divorced, and thank God for that. After that, each of them started their own life. By that time, Isabelle had realized that Manuel cared about her. And she had known for a long time that this man had become the closest person to her after the tragedy. No one, not even her parents, had been as attentive to her or instilled as much confidence in her that life wasn't over. Soon, Manuel proposed to her, and she agreed. After a quick, quiet wedding, her husband took her from the district center to his city to start a new life in a place where nothing would remind her of the past. The new life that began was so different from the old one that Isabelle quickly began to forget those difficult 6 months. She had a wonderful relationship with her second husband. She never doubted his love. Meeting her father-in-law and mother-in-law also went wonderfully. They knew about her past but accepted her without any questions or complaints, sincerely approving of their son's choice. They lived separately. Manuel, as a young specialist, was allocated a small apartment. Isabelle continued her education, got a profession, and started working. Her husband worked at the local maternity hospital. Everything in their life was perfect except for one thing: they had no children. And that turned out to be the most important thing. A year after getting married, Isabelle started to worry about it. 2 years later, she began visiting doctors. She wanted to have a child as soon as possible, but it wasn't happening. Doctors said everything was fine with her. She had a young and completely healthy body. Pregnancy would come when the time was right. It would likely come very soon, she just had to wait. Isabelle waited for several more years, then lost hope. I don't know, Manu, what's going on. Maybe I became infertile after the previous childbirth. But it can't be that we don't have children for no reason, can it? But they tell you everything is fine, and you'll have children. Believe me, I know stories like that. Recently, a woman in our department gave birth. She was over 40. She had her second child a year after the first one. And before that, she couldn't have children for 20 years. So, I have to wait for 20 years too? Maybe it's not such a long time, but I always wanted to be a young mother, and it won't happen now. I'm not young anymore, not even now. And how old are you? You're not even 30 yet. Please don't make things up. I'm not making things up. But I think we should get a divorce if this continues. I don't know why this is happening to me. Maybe it's a punishment from God. Maybe something else. But why are you wasting your time with me? I understand that a man can become a father even at 60, but why wait for it? That's it, Isabelle. So that I don't have to hear any more of these conversations, Manuel was getting angry. After all, people live without children, and that's not going to happen to us anyway. Believe me, I'm a doctor, after all. It seems that these doctors are of no use, Isabelle sighed. I've already visited 1 million of them, and it's always the same story: you need to wait. Or there's something wrong with me. The first child died, and the second one doesn't want to be born. Maybe my ex-mother-in-law was right when she said that the child didn't want to live with me and that's why he died. Simply because it's not my destiny to be a mother. Maybe I'm just not meant for it. Stop this mystical nonsense. Manuel was getting annoyed. In my opinion, nothing terrible is happening. No one is telling you that you're infertile. And doctors wouldn't hide something like that. So, children will come soon. Just remember, I wouldn't want there to be more than 3 boys and 2 girls. You can joke all you want, Isabelle smiled. Jokes aside, time passed, and there were still no children. Isabelle had already visited many medical experts, and everywhere she heard the same thing. You're perfectly fine, you just need to wait. Waiting became increasingly unbearable with each passing day, not to mention a year. Isabelle was ready to grasp at any opportunity. So, when she heard about a miracle healer who had helped many people in the most desperate situations, she started asking her husband to take her to see him. Manuel didn't really believe in miracles. What are you talking about, dear? What kind of healers? Are they wizards or charlatans? Have you forgotten that we're living in the 21st century? You say they've helped someone, but these are just rumors. Did they really help? I'm sorry, but I have very strong doubts about this. I'm a doctor, and I would be ashamed to believe in such things. Well, that's fine, don't believe. Just drive me there. The road isn't very convenient. I doubt a taxi would go there, and it's far from the bus stop. Just take me. You don't even have to go in, you can wait for me in the car. Come on, is it really so hard for you to fulfill this request of mine? Okay, even if it doesn't help. But at least I'll calm down and understand that my situation is hopeless. I'll be able to rest easy knowing that I've done everything I could. I even tried the most fantastic methods. That's exactly why I don't want to take you anywhere. You don't know what some semi-literate guy might say there, or he might make you take some questionable remedy. And you'll believe it, and you'll either wait and hope or suffer from stomach problems, or you might even stop hoping altogether. Both are equally bad. Worse than the current state of uncertainty, there's nothing. And it's a shame that you don't understand that. Since Isabelle learned about this healer, she couldn't calm down. She endlessly asked her husband to take her there. At first, he flatly refused, then he started making excuses, citing a lack of time, although he knew perfectly well that they would have to go there someday. One day, when they both had vacation, Isabelle became more determined. That's it, Manuel, do as you wish, but I'm going. With or without you, whether I can find a taxi or not, I feel like I have to go there. I'll even walk if I have to. I'm sure it won't be in vain. Manuel already knew his wife's stubbornness, so reluctantly, but he agreed. And he felt sorry for her in the end. He saw how much she was suffering. So, they had to go to this charlatan. Just like Isabelle was confident in the beneficial nature of this trip, he was sure of its futility and didn't want to let his wife go on such a long journey, the result of which was also unknown. He was sure that nothing good would come out of this trip and understood the feelings with which Isabelle would return. But he agreed, and they set off. In reality, the journey was not that far. The healer did not live in a remote village deep in the forest, but in a fairly secluded place, away from bustling towns. The road there was surprisingly picturesque. They had to drive past quite large settlements for a long time, but suddenly they ended, and the road ran along the riverbank. The opposite bank was hilly, covered with dense forest. They were driving along a gentle slope. The road separated fields and sparse groves from the river. Somehow, they had never been to these places before, so now they enjoyed the surrounding landscapes. "Oh, it's beautiful here," sighed Manuel. "And the air is so fresh. We should go into nature more often, you know. Spending weekends in a place like this is the best therapy. For me, the best therapy will be what he can help me with. And he's not a witcher, just a person who knows a little more than we do," Isabelle said. "Well, that's fine. But I ask you, if he starts offering you some potions, don't take them. Or at least don't drink them until you consult with me. Sometimes they prepare things that can make you sick afterward. Don't worry. I'm not that foolish to swallow anything and everything," Isabelle reassured her husband, but she herself thought that she would take anything if it helped. She couldn't live without children anymore, she just couldn't. The healer's house stood on the outskirts of a small village. It was perhaps the best house in the entire settlement. Not luxurious, just a sturdy, reliable house with a good owner. The appearance of this building and the surrounding land inspired confidence that they would find help here. At least that's what Isabelle believed, but Manuel thought differently. Clearly, some con artist lives here, and he probably has his own lackeys. And why not? He's been making money off gullible people like my Isabelle. Oh, Isabelle, another one of your hopes will crash here. He decided not to let his wife go alone to this sorcerer's lair. He approached the porch with her and knocked on the door. The man who opened the door did not resemble a witcher from a fairy tale or a modern-day psychic. Just an ordinary middle-aged guy, a peasant. The only thing was, his eyes were sharp, insightful, and kind. This time, Manuel also felt trust. "Come in." He greeted them, inviting them inside. The room the host led them to didn't resemble any kind of lair either. There were no dried frog and snake bundles on the walls, crystal balls, or worn-out cards on the table. Well, except for a few bundles of herbs drying near the stove. Or were they brought here for the aroma? Indeed, the hut smelled very pleasant. The atmosphere was inviting. The host brought tea and placed small jars of honey and jam on the table. Help yourselves if you want. It's just regular tea from a store-bought pack. I had a feeling guests would come today, so I brewed it. I didn't put any herbs in it, don't worry. Do you use herbs for healing? Manuel inquired. It depends on the person. Some people need herbs. But you, it seems, not so much. I can give them to you, of course, but I see you're wary. Besides, they don't heal, just strengthen. And I myself, don't exactly heal, I simply suggest a certain path. Your problem is that you already know the path yourselves, but you're going in the wrong direction. Please, tell us, Isabelle said with a suffering voice. I really can't take it anymore. I don't understand why this is happening. You see, I had my first child, but he died right after birth, and I can't seem to have any more. And time is passing, we need children. You need them, and you will have them, don't worry. But only after you understand your own worth, independently of your ability to bear children. Although, maybe even before that. Then some strange speech followed, which Manuel called superstition and was quite difficult to understand. So they left the house not in the best mood, at least Manuel. He was sure that their money and time were wasted. Well, they had gone. Perhaps Isabelle would be a little calmer now. And that man did express some reasonable thoughts about the value of one's own life, independent of someone else, even if that someone else is very important. Isabelle herself looked enlightened after this conversation. She may have understood a bit more. Or maybe something else had opened up to her after this man's speech. On the way back, the story with the box tossed by an unknown man happened. They thought he had just decided to get rid of some animal in such a horrible way. But it turned out to be even more dreadful. And now they had returned home with this child fished out of the river. Isabelle immediately started fulfilling her motherly duties. Manuel, at first, was just a doctor who needed to check the child's health. But at some point, he realized that this boy meant much more to him. And strangely, during their fruitless attempts to become parents, the question of adoption had arisen several times. Manuel suggested it to his wife. However, it always ended in Isabelle shedding bitter tears because she couldn't agree to it. How can you not understand, Manu? I want my own child. I want to carry and give birth to them, to breastfeed them. I will never be able to love someone else's child as my own. They will never truly be ours. He couldn't help but agree with her to some extent. Isabelle was right about something. But then an entirely unexpected child appeared, and powerful maternal feelings awakened in his wife, and he, too, felt equally strong paternal instincts. However, Manuel understood that they couldn't simply keep the child without repercussions. Even though he also couldn't imagine giving up this baby, he continued to persuade his wife that they needed to report it somewhere. Isabelle, you have to understand, we need to find out who his parents are, if only to hold them accountable for their crime. That man wanted to kill him, not just abandon him somewhere. If he wanted to get rid of the child, he could have left him at the door of any house, a church, or a maternity ward, but he threw him into the river. It's a miracle that we happened to pass by. But if we report it, they'll take him away from us, don't you understand? And I don't want that. While all these investigations are ongoing, the baby will be in an orphanage, alone and abandoned. Someone else might adopt him. No, forgive me, but I won't allow it. I'll call my dad now, I'm sure he'll help. By this time, Isabelle's father had advanced significantly in his career and could offer some assistance. Although he might be outraged by his daughter's decision, as it was entirely illegal. Isabelle understood this herself, which is why she had been postponing the conversation with her father, mentally rehearsing her speech directed at him. In the evening, she finally mustered the courage and called, explaining how she found the child. At first, Señor Hidalgo was genuinely outraged. Congratulations, my dear, But this isn't how things are done. After all, you didn't rescue a kitten from the river, you found a human being. He must have documents, some legal status. But what do you plan to do? Say you keep him, call him Santi, and what then? Will you live without any legal arrangements? That's why I'm calling you, Daddy. Can't you help us formalize the adoption without all the usual procedures? You know how important this is to me. I do. And that's why I haven't contacted the relevant authorities yet. And you won't do it. Isabelle was frightened. You don't want to become my enemy for life. Don't throw those words around like that. I'm not doing anything wrong, and I don't intend to. I apologize for the theatrics, but I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I want to act within the bounds of the law. The letter kills, don't you remember? Mercy is more important than truth, and these aren't empty words. I've never blamed you for anything, but now I have to say that your devotion to legality has led to this. I believe that your insistence on this terrible marriage back then played a role in the death of my first child. If you and Mom hadn't insisted on that awful marriage, I could have had a healthy pregnancy and given birth to a normal child. And it doesn't matter what anyone else would have said to you afterward. Señor Hidalgo understood that his daughter was right. He couldn't forgive himself for that mistake either. And now, after finishing the conversation, he pondered deeply. Yes, using his connections, he could fulfill his daughter's dream to legally adopt this child as her son, and then everything would be in order. He began to contemplate his next steps. It was necessary to decide, after all, whom to approach with such a delicate matter. And most importantly, it was necessary to find out where this unfortunate child came from. Leaving the heinous act committed against him unpunished was also not an option. So, they would have to find the parents. Perhaps, this would be even more challenging than arranging for adoption. He took out his notebook and started making notes, deciding whom to call first and with what question. Then he needed to learn everything from his daughter about the man who had wanted to get rid of the child. This man was clearly mentally unstable. Furthermore, it was still unknown whether the child was his. Maybe he had abducted the child from somewhere. In that case, of course, Isabelle would feel sorry for the child, as they would have to return him. But there was no other way. Señor Hidalgo devoted the next morning to solving his daughter's and her child's problems. He no longer had any doubts that this child was Isabelle's. The most crucial thing now was to ensure that nobody was searching for him. The next morning, he reassured his daughter that he would do everything possible to help them legally adopt the child. But first, they needed to find the parents. It would be good if the child's biological father had tried to abandon him, then everything would be clear. That man could be brought to court. But if it was someone else, perhaps an abductor, it would seriously complicate matters. The search began. An investigator arrived at Isabelle and Manuel's home, thoroughly questioning them and asking for a description of the man. Unfortunately, they had seen him from a distance, and they couldn't make out his face, but they provided whatever details they could about his clothing and build. Isabelle even remembered the way he walked. What about the box? Did you take the box with you? No, we didn't even think about it. It was soaking wet, just a plain cardboard box. As plain as it may seem, it could have had a lot of identifying features on it. I'm not just talking about fingerprints, but there could have been store details, a description of the contents, and that would make the search much easier. Unfortunately, we didn't think of that, Manuel said again. I think it was an unmarked box, Isabelle added. I didn't notice anything special. They found the location, and, strangely enough, they found the remnants of that same box. And the biggest stroke of luck on the side of the box, there was a postage label indicating the name of the person who had ordered something. The investigators were already thinking that the case was solved so easily and simply. But no. It turned out that a microwave had been delivered in this box to an old man who already had grandchildren in school. The box, he, of course, took out to the trash. If all this had happened in a big city, the chances of finding the person who picked up the box would have been minimal. But it was a small village on its outskirts. And here, luck was awaiting the investigator. An elderly woman, whose windows overlooked the dump, said she had seen perfectly who had taken that box. I was even planning to take it myself. Such a box would have been useful to me. But while I was getting dressed, I saw that a young lad had already taken it and dragged it somewhere. And who was this young lad? The investigator asked cautiously. Do you know him? How could I not know him? Everyone here knows him. He's a real, scoundrel, not a decent person at all. He lives in that remote place over there. I don't know his last name, but they call him Gil, short for Guillermo. His house is over there, away from all the others. He inherited it from his grandmother, a good woman named Beatrice. The old woman, judging by everything, would have been happy to tell the whole biography of both the grandmother and her children and grandchildren, but the investigator was not very interested in that. He hurried to the house of this Guillermo. And there, a terrible picture emerged. It turned out that a year ago, Guillermo had met Sandra in the city, a girl who had come to study from a neighboring country. She had enrolled in university, but she didn't get a chance to finish her studies because she met this Gil. They got acquainted, fell in love, and she believed his stories about the happy life he would provide for her. And soon she agreed to give up everything and go with him to his hometown. I have a beautiful house there, a large plot of land. You'll be the mistress. Why do you need education? We'll live, take care of the farm. You can study by correspondence if necessary. It's not a problem in our time, he persuaded the girl, who had lost her head in love. So Sandra found herself in this very village, far from civilization. The fairy tale life turned into a horror movie. The house turned out to be old and neglected, there was no sign of any farm, and she became not the mistress but the captive of an extremely cruel and unstable person. Guillermo drank, raised his hand to the woman. Not even the fact that she soon became pregnant could stop him. Realizing that she couldn't live like this, she wanted to leave. Go back home or somehow settle in the city on her own. But he wouldn't let her. To make sure Sandra wouldn't run away, he locked her up and burned her documents in the stove. Finding herself in a hopeless situation, not knowing where to seek help, the girl lived as a captive. She never went to see a doctor. That was out of the question. Guillermo didn't let her go anywhere and didn't allow her to even communicate with the neighbors. Most of the villagers didn't even know that someone besides him was living in Gil's house. Sandra's only hope was that when the time for childbirth came, her partner would finally take her to the maternity hospital. After all, he must have understood that she couldn't give birth on her own. There, she would at least have the opportunity to communicate with people and ask for help. It turned out that Gil also knew that as soon as she was out of his sight, the girl would report him, so he had no intention of calling for an ambulance. When Sandra began to have contractions and begged him to call a doctor or at least a woman who could help her, he only replied, "You'll manage. Women used to give birth in the fields, and here you are lying on a bed, and nothing will happen to you. I'll die. Don't you understand? I feel very bad, Gil, please," the unfortunate woman groaned. "Just help me yourself. Have you gone crazy? What can I do? Ha, look at the midwife of me. Handle it however you can. And don't scream too loudly. Nobody will hear you here anyway. And I'm not going to listen to your screams." He locked the door to the room and left, leaving the woman alone. When he returned a couple of hours later, he didn't hear her cries. There was only a faint whimpering coming from the locked room. Well, everything is fine, she must have given birth, he thought. Entering the room, Gil saw that things were much worse. Sandra was no longer breathing, and the floor was covered in blood. He wasn't sure that human can bleed so much. Next to the woman was a living baby. While waiting for the woman to give birth, Guillermo had managed to drink somewhere. And the sight he saw didn't help him concentrate either, so without even thinking about what he was doing, he ran to the dump, grabbed some box, wrapped the baby in some rags at home, put it in the box, and ran to the river. What else am I supposed to do with all this? She died herself, and now I have to deal with the child? That's the last thing I need. To hell with all this, he thought in a panic. At that moment, he didn't even think about the fact that at home there was a woman's body that would be much harder to get rid of. He carried Sandra closer to the road at night, and no one noticed his movements. And even if someone had, they wouldn't have paid much attention. Who knows what that drunkard Gil was up to? The woman's body was only found in the morning. They took it to the morgue of the local hospital. The criminal was arrested. They found out the name and surname of the girl who died while giving birth to a child from him. It turned out that her parents had been looking for her for a long time. They were informed of their daughter's death, and they immediately set off to take her body home and bury her in the family grave. How did she die? The distraught mother of the girl wept. She was so young and healthy. Unfortunately, she fell under the influence of a scoundrel who is already under arrest and will be punished for his actions. She gave birth to his child without any assistance and died. And where's the child? We want to take him, Sandra's father said. But this was already a serious problem for Manuel and Isabelle, who, over the days of the investigation, had grown deeply attached to the boy. Hearing that the parents of his mother wanted to take the child, they became frightened. No, please, no. Don't tell them where the child is. Tell them he's missing. Or anything else, Isabelle pleaded. You know, there's already too much lying in this story, and I think we shouldn't add to it. Let me arrange a meeting with the girl's parents. You can explain to them that the child is with you and doing well. They are the grandparents, not wealthy people. Besides the deceased, they have other children and possibly grandchildren, so maybe you can come to an agreement? Isabelle, upon learning the story of the woman who gave birth to her son, cried long and bitterly. She couldn't shake the thought of how much this unfortunate woman had suffered. The story of poor Sandra reminded her of her own unhappy life with her first husband. She once thought there couldn't be more tragic stories than hers. It turns out that things can be much worse. She imagined the torment of the poor woman who had to go through her pregnancy all alone. How she prayed to God for protection for her child, how she called for help from her mother, who, alas, was very far away. Sandra, dear, Isabelle whispered, looking up at the sky, I swear to you that I will do everything for our son. Where you are now, you probably see how well he's doing. And it will always be well. And forgive me for not telling him about you yet. He's still little, such stories aren't for him. When he grows up, he will know everything. And he will always remember and love you. Beg God for us, Sandra, you're with him now, I know. I couldn't calm down for a long time, constantly thinking about the deceased girl, her parents, who are now suffering just as much, imagining their daughter's last moments. Isabelle and Manuel welcomed their new relatives into their home, allowing them to see their grandson and the living conditions they had provided. Isabelle tried to explain how much she had suffered from not being able to have a child. She talked about her first son and tearfully begged them to leave Santiago with her. I will die without him, do you understand? I know he's your flesh and blood, but he's mine as well. Please, don't separate us. He has grown to love me too. He can't be without me. I promise you that I will do everything to make him happy and to make sure he doesn't forget you. Well then, Sandra's father sighed heavily. We see that he's doing well with you. We certainly can't provide such conditions. We live in a village, and we have 3 younger children as well. We can leave him with you, but on the condition that you don't hinder our communication with our grandson. We still want to know how he's living, how he's growing up, and if he ever gets into trouble with you, we will take him. Of course, you will be our most cherished guests, our closest relatives. Come with the children at any time. Santiago will know you as his grandparents. Just don't separate us, please. Isabelle cried. And that's how they decided it. Isabelle and Manuel adopted Santiago. His biological grandparents went back to their homeland. But the connection was not severed. Thanks to the expanding opportunities for communication, the grandparents were able to watch their grandson's life via video calls and even speak to him. He turned out to be a very capable boy, walking and talking much earlier than his peers. He even started learning his grandparents' native language. They visited a couple of times to see their grandson. He knew them as his own family. But he was still too young to understand the true nature of their relationship with him and his parents. He wasn't interested, and Isabelle didn't want to burden him with it. What would happen later? It worried Isabelle a little, but she decided not to dwell on it. Perhaps someday he would find out everything, but that could wait. For now, why not be happy? After all, she was truly happy, a mother to her beloved son. When Santiago turned 7, his parents decided to visit his grandparents in Sandra's homeland. I think someday we'll have to tell Santiago about his biological mother, Manuel said to his wife, and seeing her change of expression, he added, when he grows up, of course, not now, don't worry. Well, yes, maybe when he grows up. I don't know if we should tell him the whole story in detail. We have to talk about his father then. By the way, where is he now? I hope he won't show up. I don't think he'll want to find him. And I don't think he'll be pleased to meet us. Don't worry about that, her husband reassured her. Soon, Isabelle found out that worrying about it would be a crime. Just when they were visiting Santiago's relatives, Isabelle discovered that she would soon have another child. It seemed like a real miracle because they had both given up hope for it. Having reconciled with the fact that they would only be parents to one son, suddenly. You see, Isabelle, I told you this would happen someday, Manuel rejoiced. Isabelle replied, perhaps it's our reward for accepting Santiago. He brought us happiness, no doubt. I had already resigned myself to it. And I believe this time everything will go smoothly. Her happy husband realized that he needed to be especially careful with Isabelle now. So, when they returned from their visit, Manuel didn't tell his wife about the 2 letters he had received from an unknown person asking for a substantial sum of money in exchange for silence. Don't think you can pass off someone else's child as your own for your entire life. He's already old enough to know who he is, where he came from, and that they wanted to drown him like a puppy. I don't think the boy will like it. But friends and neighbors will quite enjoy it, and it will provide excellent fodder for gossip. Friends of Santiago will also be pleased, as he's becoming quite a bother. Besides, the biological father may very well want to claim his child. That's what fathers do. The abhorrent words fell upon the man's soul like stones. There was no doubt about who the author of this letter was. But what should he do next? Of course, he had no intention of giving money to anyone. Not because he couldn't afford it. He would pay any price for the peaceful life of his family. But it's well known that you can't negotiate with blackmailers. Seeing the vulnerability of their victim, they would start demanding more and more. And in the end, they would disclose their knowledge. But how should he proceed then? And where is this biological father? To find out, Manuel secretly turned to his father-in-law. Señor Hidalgo darkened as he listened to his son-in-law. Well, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. They released him a little earlier. He's sick, that rat. And what can you do about it? You can't prosecute him for this. He's not even threatening your life. And it's not clear whether he intends to carry out the threat at all. In any case, an investigation will make everything known. Catching the scoundrel and giving him a beating won't stop him. Quite the opposite. So what should I do then? Pay him? Have him constantly coming for money until he's completely satisfied? Manuel asked in despair. No, of course, that's not an option. Then what is the option? Allow him to disclose everything, to disgrace the child? And Isabelle, she's pregnant, you know. How about moving? You've been planning it for a while, haven't you? You were invited somewhere. Yes, we were invited, but we thought of doing it a little later. And it's not that simple. You can't move in one day. You need to sell the apartment, prepare the documents. There will be so much to take care of. And it's humiliating, running away from the blackmailer and the extortionist. We've been trying to escape our past all the time, both then and now. But back then, what? We didn't go far. And now? I agree with you. But if there are no other means to protect yourself, what now? Traumatizing the unborn child. Don't worry too much about collecting documents and everything else. I'll help with that. But when it comes to protecting yourselves from him, sorry, no one can help you with that. So, make a choice. Either tell everything to Santiago today, and to whoever else you think is necessary, or no, telling him now is not an option. Think for yourselves, he's only 7 years old, how can you explain it to a child now? Especially when Nadia is about to give birth. It will turn out that the second child is biological, and he is not. We'll have to wait. I feel sorry for Santiago, he's so vulnerable. You're to blame yourselves for that, that's how you've raised him. You're too protective of him, sheltering him from life. But that's another question, and for now, there's nothing else to do. Get ready and go. I'll help as much as I can. And if he finds us there? There? Is he a detective or a spy? He won't find anything there. It's strange that he did find out this time. And he won't write about your adopted son in newspapers or on the radio when you move, you'll simply cut off all ties. Oh, Manolo, it's a shame that you and Isabelle didn't meet before all these stories and her first marriage. Then we wouldn't have had Santiago. He would have drowned in the river. No, everything seems to have been right. Until this scoundrel was released. And with this, I hope we can handle it. Manuel came home late, when Isabelle had already put their son to bed. When she asked about the reason for his late return, he initially decided to tell the truth. After all, he would have to tell her about it eventually. But he started with the main point. I met with your father today, we had a conversation. But here's the thing, Belle, we'll have to move to the capital soon. And not just anywhere, but to the capital, he said cheerfully, as if delivering joyful news. His wife picked up his tone, although she was surprised. Have you finally made up your mind? Is this the right time, Manu? After all, she pointed to her belly. Well, do you think there are no maternity hospitals there? I'll be working in one of them, not the worst one. They'll accept you there, don't worry. Manuel really didn't want to tell Isabelle the truth. He was afraid of upsetting and scaring her. Deciding to keep everything hidden, he painted an inspiring picture of the advantages of living in the capital. Santiago will go to a good school there, the level of education is much higher. And he needs it, you can see for yourself, he has above average abilities. And the second child will have the same opportunities. And you'll be able to find a job when the younger one goes to daycare. Hold on, Manu, you're talking as if I'm resisting with all my might. I'm not going to refuse. But why did you go to see Dad? That's what I talked to him about. You understand, we don't have time to waste, and we can't do it without his help. He was understanding and said he would do everything in his power. We need to leave without delay, so we'll have to give him a power of attorney, Manuel began to explain. And suddenly, Isabelle asked, Listen, why such a hurry? It's like we're running away from someone. It's strange, isn't it? What are you talking about? Her husband exclaimed. I told you, I was called for work. Do you think a maternity hospital in the capital will wait for me? Anyone would be happy to work there. And what, are there no other decent doctors besides you? Isabelle asked skeptically. Are you doubting that? Her husband asked, offended. I doubt that you're telling me the whole truth. It seems like you have something else on your mind, she confessed. Well, there you go, Manuel thought sadly, apparently pregnant women really develop some sort of extrasensory abilities. What should he do now? Continue lying or tell the truth? It seemed bad either way. Lies seemed good and reliable, but they were lies. He himself didn't know which maternity hospital would hire him and if they would hire him at all. And where they would live right after arriving. There were too many questions for him, but he had to try to convince his wife of something. Well, Isabelle, don't you want to start fresh? he said, almost plaintively. What's wrong with our life today? I'm perfectly happy with it. No, moving to the capital is a dream for everyone, but not like this, out of the blue. Are you sure we'll arrive, and we'll have an apartment right away? No, she really reads my thoughts, he thought with annoyance, and decisively said. No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about many things. And I really like our current life. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I'm afraid someone will ruin it. That's why I insist on moving. There's no other way. We talked about it with your dad today. What are you talking about? His wife asked, immediately becoming more serious. Is it really? Yes, Isabelle. Manuel sighed deeply, took a letter out of his pocket, and placed it in front of her. Isabelle took the sheet and started reading. When she finished, she raised serious, dry eyes to her husband. So why did you have to make up the job offer? Did you talk to Dad about this? Does he know everything now? Yes, about this. And he suggested this option himself, as the only possible one. I agree with him. And I don't think there will be any big problems. We'll sell this apartment. We'll rent a place there for now. And then we'll see. It's good that you told me everything, Isabelle smiled encouragingly. It would have been bad if we had come, and then it turned out that no one was expecting us. So at least we'll come with our eyes open. Let's start getting ready then. We'll begin tomorrow. Everything went better than they expected. Manuel found a job in the suburbs, which was much more preferable for raising children. The local hospital had a maternity ward, and they eagerly hired him as a neonatologist. There shouldn't have been any problems with housing either. They were immediately provided with official accommodation and assured that he could buy a place if he wanted to in the near future. Manuel wrote a power of attorney to his father-in-law, allowing him to manage their property. Señor Hidalgo assured them that he would do his best to sell the apartment and their belongings at the best price. It's a pity that you're leaving, we won't see each other as often. But we'll come with Isabelle's mother to see the younger grandson. How are your parents taking it? Manuel's parents were indeed worried, and they didn't quite understand the rush of the move. They didn't go into all the details. But naturally, they promised help and support, mainly financial. They were well-off people. I think we won't need that. Money is far from the most important thing in this situation, Isabelle told her husband. I'm very happy that we're leaving, and finally, all the fears will be behind us. Our children should grow up in a peaceful environment. We'll tell Santiago the truth, but only when we decide it's necessary, Manuel decided.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.